the autumn of 1822, around 250 men, women, and children sold everything they owned and boarded ships bound for a country called Poyais. They were not fools. Poyais had a flag. It had a coat of arms, a written constitution, and a capital city on the coast with a cathedral and a bank. It had its own honors, its own army, and land offices in London where you could buy a piece of it. It had a national currency, and before they sailed, many of them changed their British pounds into crisp Poyais dollars, so they would have money to spend when they arrived. They arrived to nothing. No harbor, no city, no bank, no government, no nation at all. Only a strip of empty jungle on a fever coast and the sea at their backs. There was no Poyais. There never had been. It was the invention of one man, a Scottish soldier who had given himself a crown and a title, His Serene Highness the Cazique of Poyais, and then sold that title, in bonds and in land, to half of London. Within a year, more than half of those settlers were dead. This is the story of Gregor MacGregor, the man who sold a nation that did not exist. Start with the truth, because the truth is what made the lie work. Gregor MacGregor was born in Scotland on Christmas Eve, 1786, at Glengyle, on the north shore of Loch Katrina. He came from a family with a military name, and he went looking for one of his own. In 1803, he joined the British Army and served in the Napoleonic Wars in Portugal. Then he did something bolder. He sailed for South America and threw himself into the Wars of Independence. This part is not invented. He fought under Francisco de Miranda and under Simón Bolívar. He rose to colonel in the Venezuelan Republican forces, was made a brigadier-general, and later a divisional general. He married into a prominent Venezuelan family, a woman named Josefa Aristeguieta. In 1817, he seized Amelia Island off the coast of Florida and proclaimed a short-lived Republic of the Floridas before abandoning it the same year. By 1820, the wars had moved on without him. But the rank was real, the reputation was real, and that is the whole point. A soldier of fortune with a genuine war record and a general's rank was not a man you doubted over a glass of wine. He had earned that reputation in the field, and everyone in a London drawing room knew it. So when he walked back into the city and began talking about a country, people leaned in and listened, because the soldier was real. Everything he built next stood on that one true foundation. So he went looking for land. On the Mosquito Coast, in what is now Honduras and Nicaragua, MacGregor met a local Miskito king named George Frederick Augustus. On the 29th of April, 1820, the king signed a document. It granted MacGregor roughly 8 million acres of coast and jungle. 8 million acres. An area of some 12,500 square miles, close to the size of a small country, handed over on a single sheet of paper. What the king had actually given him was a worthless claim to an empty, disease-ridden shore that nobody had settled. What MacGregor decided he had been given was a kingdom. He named the territory Poyais. He gave himself a title to match it, His Serene Highness the Cazique of Poyais. Cazique being a native word for prince. Neither the country nor the crown existed before he said the words. The king had signed away some jungle. He had never created any prince, and he would later disown both the grant and the title. But by then, MacGregor was already at sea, and he did not come home a tired soldier looking for work. He came home a reigning prince, sailing back to Britain to sell the land that never was. Back in Britain, MacGregor did not simply describe Poyais. He built it in every detail except the one that mattered. Poyais was given a national flag and a coat of arms with unicorns on it. It was given a written constitution. It had a system of honors and titles you could be granted, and an army you could be commissioned into. It opened land offices in London, in Edinburgh, and in Glasgow, staffed and official, where respectable people could come and invest in their future. Think about the nerve of that. Not one piece of it was real, and yet all of it looked exactly the way a young nation was supposed to look. And then he gave the country its holy book. In 1822, a fat guidebook appeared in the shops, sketch of the Mosquito Shore, including the territory of Poyais. It ran to more than 350 pages, dense with detail about the soil, the climate, the rivers, and the people. It was presented as the honest report of an independent traveler, a British officer named Captain Thomas Strangeways. Captain Strangeways did not exist. There was no such man. The book was almost certainly the work of MacGregor and his circle, an entire volume of praise for Poyais, dressed up as the word of a neutral witness. A country on paper, vouched for by an author who never lived. The jewel of the book was the capital city. It was called St. Joseph, and on the page it was beautiful. St. Joseph was described as a flourishing seaside town with a bank, a parliament, a cathedral, and by some accounts, an opera house. The book suggested the wider territory already held as many as 20,000 inhabitants, a settled, half-built nation, simply waiting for hard-working Britons to come and finish it. The whole of Poyais was painted as a temperate paradise, a place where a poor family from a cold and crowded corner of Scotland could cross the sea and become landowners in a warm and Christian country. For a family with little to lose, it was the offer of a lifetime. You sold up at home, you bought your acres of Poyais, and you sailed to a country where a house and a future were said to be waiting for you. Every word of it was aimed at people who would never get close enough to check. And not one brick of St. Joseph had ever been laid. It was the capital that never was. Here is where MacGregor turned a story into a fortune, because Poyais did not make money one way. It made money three ways at once. The first stream was the loan. In October 1822, MacGregor floated a Poyais government loan on the London Stock Exchange. 2,000 bonds, $100 each, sold to investors at $80, paying 6% interest, and handled through a respectable London bank, Sir John Perring, Shaw, Barber and Company. The man fronting it, John Perring, was a baronet and a member of Parliament. The face value of the loan was $200,000. Poyais bonds were printed and traded in the London papers, listed alongside the debt of real nations. Poyais was able to borrow at yields barely higher than those charged real countries like Peru, Chile, and Colombia. Sit with that for a moment. The City of London lent to a country that did not exist on almost the same terms as it lent to Peru. The most respectable names in British finance had looked hard at Poyais and seen a real nation worth backing. The second stream was land. Ordinary emigrants could buy Poyais land cheaply, at first around 2 shillings and 3 pence an acre, later raised to 4 shillings, and by the standard account about 500 people bought in. These were ordinary people, spending real savings on a patch of a country that existed only in a book. The third stream was the cleverest and the cruelest. Before they left, settlers were urged to change their real British pounds into the paper money of their new home. MacGregor had his own Poyais dollars printed. By some accounts, around 5,000 notes were run off, reportedly by the same printer the Bank of Scotland used. Good families handed over real gold and sailed away, holding banknotes for a bank that did not exist. Real Poyais dollars survive to this day, sitting in museum collections. Beautifully engraved money for a country that was never there. The bonds sold, the land sold, and in the autumn of 1822, the first ship of settlers set out to claim the country they had paid for. The Honduras packet sailed from London on the 10th of September, 1822, carrying about 70 emigrants. They reached the Mosquito Coast that November, near a place called Black River. 4 months later, a second and larger ship followed. The Kennersley Castle left Leith, near Edinburgh, on the 22nd of January, 1823, with almost 200 more, and reached the coast on the 20th of March. What both ships found was the same. There was no St. Joseph, there was no harbor, no town, no government, no gleaming capital, no streets, no docks, no parliament, nobody expecting them. There was only untouched jungle on a fever coast and the rainy season coming on. Their Poyais dollars were worthless paper. The paradise in the guidebook was an empty coast, and behind them, 5 more emigrant ships were already being fitted out in British ports, ready to carry the next wave of families to the same empty shore. They tried to build. There was nothing to build with and nowhere to fall back to. The rainy season came, and with it, the fever. On that swampy, unhealthy coast, disease spread through the settlers fast. They had no working town, no shelter that mattered, no real leadership, and the supplies soon ran short. Between the fever, the hunger, and the despair, they began to bury each other in the sand. Slowly, the truth settled over the camp. There was no relief coming, because there was no Poyais to send it. Of the roughly 250 who had sailed, more than half died. At least 180 of them, by the best accounts, never left that coast alive. When a ship from neighboring British Honduras reached the survivors, it carried off a broken remnant. Fewer than 50 of the settlers ever saw Britain again. And here was the final cruelty. Those 5 further ships, packed with new families and ready to sail, were stopped and turned back in time, which means the true toll could have been far worse. Word of what had happened raced back across the Atlantic, and in London people finally began to ask who the Cazique of Poyais really was. You would expect the story to end with MacGregor in chains. It does not. As the truth came out, he slipped across the channel to France, and within a year he was doing the whole thing again. By 1824, he had set up a new company in Paris to relaunch the Poyais scheme, and by 1825 he was reportedly trying to raise a fresh loan of almost $300,000 before French officials grew suspicious and seized a shipload of new emigrants at the port. He was put on trial for fraud in France in 1826, along with 3 associates. And here is the part that still astonishes. MacGregor was acquitted. Only 1 minor associate was convicted. The man who had invented a nation walked out of that courtroom a free man. He drifted back to London and ran smaller Poyais schemes for another decade, selling scraps of a country that had already killed people. Then, in 1838, he sailed to Venezuela, the republic he had genuinely helped to free as a young soldier. They welcomed him home as a hero. They gave him back his rank and a general's pension. The same man who had sent more than 180 settlers to their deaths on a coast that did not exist now spent his last years as a decorated officer of the state, drawing his pension, answering to no one for Poyais. Gregor MacGregor died in Caracas in December 1845, aged 58. He was buried with full military honors in Caracas Cathedral, with the president of Venezuela, Carlos Sublet, and his cabinet marching behind the coffin. So what was Poyais in the end? The kindest reading, argued by at least one modern historian, is that it was not a cold-blooded swindle at all, but a failed colonial project, a real, if reckless attempt at a colony that curdled into disaster. It is worth holding that possibility in your hand, but hold this next to it. Whatever else Poyais was, it sent around 250 people to an empty coast on the strength of a city that never existed, and more than half of them died there. The standard biography calls it one of the most audacious frauds in history, and it is easy to see why. Most swindlers forge a signature or a will or one false document. MacGregor forged a flag, a constitution, a bank, a currency, a capital, and a national loan. And then he forged the faith of the people who bought all of it. He did not pick a pocket. He raised a whole imaginary country and invited an empire to invest in it. and the empire did. The strangest part is that he was barely punished for any of it. He died an honored general, mourned by a president, marching bands at his back. The people who paid for Poyais lie in unmarked graves on a coast that never had a country. The file on Gregor MacGregor, soldier of Venezuela, His Serene Highness the Cazique of Poyais, ruler of a nation that existed only on paper and in the ground where his settlers were buried. Case closed.